Entitled mother pushes me away in my wheelchair to take my spot. A few years ago, I was living in Las Vegas, and an entitled mother literally wheeled me away from my family. I have a number of health issues, and after a few botched surgeries and neurological damage, I was bedridden. I never left my house or bed except for doctor's appointments. I hadn't been out at all for 2.5 years. I'd worked really hard on my daily physical therapy, and my balance had greatly improved. My family came out for a visit, my husband was stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, and I was so excited to surprise them with my improvements. I could stand and walk and was actually wearing pants. To celebrate, I wanted to go and see the fountains at the Bellagio. For most people, this is a nice outing, but for me, this was years in the making. I was nervous that I might get overtired and lost in the fast-moving crowds, so we had to bring my wheelchair. We knew the schedule of the fountains and arrived super early to secure a spot in front where I could see from my chair. It was such an important moment for all of us. We lined up by the fence, and no sooner did the show start than I felt this jerking on my wheelchair. I thought maybe someone had tripped on me, and I immediately looked up to apologize. I was pretty self-conscious and ashamed of being out in a wheelchair in such a big crowd. When I glanced up to apologize, I saw this woman with a small child on her hip, using one hand to literally pull me away from the fence. Because she was only using one hand, she spun me completely around to face the street. Yeah, in hindsight, I think I should have fought and shouted, but in the moment, I was just trying to not get squished by all the people bustling by who couldn't see me. I had one poor guy basically land in my lap. I was a little preoccupied, and I didn't think about screaming at that moment. I was stunned. I could hear everyone reacting to the fountain show, and here I was looking dumb, awkwardly facing a bunch of strangers. I yelled for my husband, but he couldn't hear me over the noise. I looked behind me, and this woman had plopped her child up onto the guardrail where I'd been sitting. Never made eye contact with me, never said one word to me, and had treated me like a piece of luggage. I tried to stand up, but the people around me had crowded me so much that I didn't have room to push my chair back enough. I desperately looked around at the strangers in front of me, hoping someone who had seen what happened would help. It then dawned on me that this was a huge family and friend group. They all began nudging me aside further and further away from my family. It all happened so fast. I found myself pushed into the walking area, where people who weren't stopping to watch the fountain show were basically trying to get around me. People couldn't see me through the crowd and were stumbling over and past me. I couldn't see anyone from my family anymore and was trying hard to push myself up out of my chair the way my physical therapist had taught me. I felt someone grabbing my chair again and I panicked. I started yelling, "No, please no!" And then I realized it was my husband. He had glanced to check on me and to take a picture of me being out for the first time, and I was gone. He had to fight his way through the crowd, the same family group, to find me. I burst into tears. I don't know why, but it was like all the trauma from the last few years hit me all at once. I told him they'd pushed me away. After putting it together, my husband was angry. He turned to this group of people and demanded to know who had pushed me away. By this time, the fountain show was pretty much over. The group initially just ignored my husband like they had me, until I pointed out the woman with her child as the culprits. My family confronted her, nicely, I might add, and tried to explain why a wheelchair is an extension of a person, etc., the whole spiel. She at first pretended like she didn't speak English, but I'd heard them talking amongst themselves in English while they pushed me into the walking area, and I told my husband as much. She then gave up on that act and told my family about how I was in their way and I probably couldn't see anyway. And the man with her claimed in a raised voice that, in their country, they don't take their shameful family members out in public. To which my husband responded, "If that were true, none of you would be here." I was maybe even more shocked by being called shameful than by being wheeled away. I managed the courage to tell him that what he said was bullcrap and that, "I'm sure people in your country are actually very kind and would be proud if I was their daughter." I remember the exact words I said because later I was quite proud that I'd stood up to them. The crowd sort of collectively scoffed, spoke to one another quickly in what I think was Hindi, and slowly walked away as if nothing had happened. We didn't stay for the next show because I just wanted to go home. One of the sadder revelations was finding out why my husband was able to just barely rein in his rage. He said that what held him back from losing his crap was that he didn't want to get thrown out of the military, because then I'd have lost my health insurance. I don't know which is worse, pushing a disabled person in a wheelchair out of your way, or wrongfully painting your countrymen as prejudiced. Oosh, yeah, I feel like we definitely shouldn't just pin all of this on cultural differences. In our time on the channel, we've definitely encountered Karens from all classes and nationalities who would definitely pull crap like this given half a chance. It may be true that there's more of a tendency to conceal family members with disabilities in India on some accounts though, but I can't imagine that all people there are just that cruel about dealing with them in public. But oh my god, I can't imagine how rough it was to have this be your first major reintroduction to the outside world and the public in general. As a nominally functional person, if I have a rough encounter with a bunch of idiots like this, it's enough to make me want to hide away for a good long while and take solace in some computer games instead. So I hope this doesn't ruin the outside world for you. I'd say that being able to argue back and call them out on their crappy behavior was very impressive for someone who'd been pulled out of public life for a while, and it was awkward and unexpected enough that no one could fault you on your initial inaction. There are some moments when people pull crap like this where you need a solid 30 seconds to come to terms with just how awful and selfish people are being, because you can't quite believe this is happening to you. I'd say that was likely part of what was happening with your reaction. I hope you're doing better these days. Also, kudos to your husband, although the explanation as to why he cut back his response is heartbreaking. During the pandemic, I messed up by accidentally stealing a neighbor's mangoes, and they've been trying to catch me for a month. I've been in lockdown in Shanghai, China for 2 months. During the first month, residents were basically under house arrest, unable to leave the house to buy groceries, so my neighbors organized group buy, where the entire building ordered food together. One day, I, as usual, sneaked out of the building to hang out with friends in a different district. Came back at around 11:30 p.m. and saw a basket on the front desk with a couple of mangoes in there. I thought those were up for grabs because they were in an open styrofoam box, looking half empty. So I took some and went back to my room. The third day, a friend living in my building came to visit and said the group buy chat group was trying to catch a mango thief. I freaked out and went back to check the group chat. Someone said she brought a box of mangoes, couldn't find them, asked if someone mistakenly took those, and 5 minutes later, another guy, let's call him Detective, said, "Let me go check the security camera." And the guy went to check hours of footage from 2 security cameras in the lobby and then uploaded screenshots and videos of me taking those mangoes in the group chat. My god. The good thing was, because I was sneaking out of the building, I tried to stay low by wearing a beanie, a gigantic mask, and an oversized jacket. The hallway was very dark anyways, and even my mum wouldn't be able to tell that was me. The bad thing was, it made me look just like a thief. Also, that was already day 3 and I'd eaten the mangoes already. So the detective guy went back to check 5 hours of footage of the camera at the main entrance, from 6:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Again, because I snuck in, I wasn't shown on that footage. Then the detective guy and his neighbors, who were obviously bored to death, started speculating. They first thought I was male because of the jacket and the beanie, and then female based on my shoulder and head ratio and the cut of my pants apparently, and that I lived between floors 1 and 3 on the west side. I don't, by the way. And that I must have went back to the garage to grab something from my car before coming back to the building, since I was carrying a bag. I don't own a car and I needed a bag to carry my PS4 controller and some games to the friend's house. That I must be an experienced thief because I went straight to the pile of mangoes and started putting them in my bag. For frick's sake, I didn't know these were very private property. Anyways, in the past month I tried to buy some mangoes to give back to the neighbor, but my order kept getting cancelled, so I haven't succeeded. I went back to check the price of the entire box and it was around $10. Last night, it's been a month since the mango snafu, I got invited to one of the neighbors' houses for dinner. We drank and talked about random things until the detective guy showed up. He quickly started reviewing the mango case all over again, including the fact that he recently went back to the crime scene to reproduce my route. So there I was, the mango thief, sitting next to the enthusiastic amateur mango detective, his next-door neighbor who just didn't want to hear one more word about mangoes, and my next-door neighbor who's a policewoman and an expert in theft cases, and the host who had no idea what was going on. In short, a guy spent over a month trying to catch me who accidentally took someone else's mangoes. Oh no. Well, at a certain point, the window of opportunity to come clean just kind of passed you by, didn't it? And it sounds like you did at least try to silently recompensate them after a fact. A shame that supply chains just weren't working out for you. I don't know what sort of economic status you guys in your apartment had. Maybe not so bad if you live in a building with CCTV and have a PlayStation, so you might not have ruined this person's life. To be honest, you might have actually given some of the others something to do. If you're being treated like prisoners in your own building, then having something like the mango thief happen would likely be a godsend just for something to occupy Mr. Detective's time. That guy must have wasted hours looking into this stuff, while likely enjoying the endeavor, and it seems like you at least gave him a purpose for a whole month of the very tough first few months of the pandemic. Maybe you should commit another crime sometime soon if his trail runs cold. Engage in an ongoing game of cat and mouse. Maybe you could claim to be the victim of a self-imposed crime to throw him off the scent again. You could give this man's life a purpose. I say all this as if it wasn't years ago during the pandemic. Either you got caught by now, or you've all gone back to your normal lives. You definitely weren't purposefully a jerk. This all seems like an accident gone too far. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Karen harasses me in my own darn house and makes a fool out of herself. I live in a ground floor apartment in the middle of my little town with a small courtyard at the back. There's a lovely set of glass sliding doors that open from the living room into said courtyard, and on the other side of the courtyard fence is a public footpath with a public car park behind it. It's lunchtime at the moment, so there's a person walking past every 5 minutes or so. It's also useful to know, for context, that I'm physically disabled and use a walking stick. My genetic disorder, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, also makes me look significantly younger than I am, so despite being 31 years old, I'm often mistaken for a teenager, especially by Karens for whom I seem to be a gosh darn magnet. Anyway, on to the story. So I was sitting on my sofa watching TV and eating my lunch when I spotted one of those little black millipedes on the carpet. We get a lot of them at this time of year. So I used an empty muesli bar box to scoop it up and chuck it over the fence, so that it hopefully won't come back into the apartment. No big deal, right? There was this Karen walking along the footpath a fair way down from our fence, and she yelled something like, "I saw what you just did." I didn't think she was barking at me, since I hadn't done anything wrong or unusual. So I went back inside, and then she appeared at our back gate, shouting at me for throwing rubbish over the fence and littering. I told her that I'd thrown a millipede over the fence that I'd found on the carpet. She accused me of lying and said she had seen me throw a box. I opened the fly screen and held up the empty muesli bar box and said, "You mean this one?" She froze and stammered a bit before saying, "Well, obviously you threw something else then." Like I was being the idiot here. I then said, "Then where is it?" And this awful woman actually started scouring the flower bed between the footpath and the car park for the imaginary rubbish she was adamant that I'd thrown. I guess she found nothing that she could reasonably accuse me of having thrown out there because she came back to the fence and barked, "If I ever catch you littering again, missy, you'll be dealing with the police." So I said, "Sure, I'd love to tell them about you harassing a disabled woman in her own home. We'll see how that goes for you." And she stormed off. What the actual frick? I get dealing with Karens in the wild, but in my own gosh darn home? I wish I'd thought to snap a photo of her just in case. Hindsight is 20/20, I guess. Sounds like you need to get a terrarium of different bugs to throw at this woman if she returns. But I doubt she will. She probably went out with whoever qualifies as a friend to this sort of person and soaked in the social credit of her story of being violently attacked by a millipede-wielding millennial. This kind of person isn't usually very socially brave, they just love attention. Also, the fact that she demonstrably found nothing and still seemed to think that she had something to call the police over is particularly telling of someone's incapacity to just admit for even a second that they might have done something wrong. This wasn't about littering, this was about needing some kind of acknowledgement from literally anyone for a few minutes of the day. So weird and sad. The author does mention that they seem to be a magnet for Karens, and given the symptoms of your particular case, I can just now begin to imagine that, yeah, you must have some interesting encounters. Looking young and being physically disabled to a degree, And being a woman on top of either one of those two things, you'd probably only have to add being a minority or something to virtually guarantee a run-in with a Karen every time you left the house. My sincerest condolences. Tear open our driveway to pour concrete? Fine, you'll probably enjoy having to dig the concrete out of the ground twice. Not about me, but a guy I used to work with. He was a mountain of a guy, a huge Turk, but the kindest guy I've ever met. He'd do anything for the people he liked. Nobody ever saw anyone get on his bad side until that fateful day. As it happens, he was also our delivery driver, and he spent most days on the road in his semi, leaving before dawn and returning quite late, if at all, that day. Our warehouse had a driveway large enough for him to pull the semi into and load and unload. The supermarket next door decided to do some renovations and expand. When they started construction, they started tearing out their brick parking lot and getting close to tearing out our driveway. The boss runs out and tells them where our property line is and is assured that they won't cross onto our property. Everyone goes back inside and no one worries, until there's suddenly a raging bear Turk standing in the break room shouting about how the driveway has been torn up and he can't get his lorry in. We go out and indeed, the driveway is half missing and there's a concrete building foundation poured in. Construction workers are nowhere in sight. The boss sends the supermarket manager an email address and everyone goes home for the day. Next day, we arrive to the site of very angry construction workers. Apparently, the delivery driver went back in the middle of the night with some bolt cutters, liberated about 30 of their shopping carts, and stuck them into the drying concrete in various comical positions. Overnight, the concrete hardened and the carts became quite difficult to remove. Construction crew brings in the jackhammers, and 4 days later, most of the concrete is gone, and they start preparing another pour, this time leaving our driveway intact. The foundation comes out fine and everything is looking good. At that time, my boss shows up with the announcement that he'd had a survey done, and while they didn't tear open our driveway the second time, they were still closer to our property line than allowed, and had already filed a complaint to get the concrete removed. Took them another week of jackhammering to get it out. In short, construction crew tore open our driveway and poured concrete onto our property. Gave them a physical reason to dig it out one time and a legal reason to dig it out a second time. I don't know how annoyed the construction workers would be, to be honest, unless they somehow aren't all on union contracts. This just sounds like they got several days more paid work than they initially would have bargained for. I guess they'd be annoyed at having their scheduled other projects pushed back, but no contractor I've ever met has been this scrupulous about their schedule. Granted, the supermarket would theoretically be annoyed at having to pay multiple times the initial cost of the construction costs, plus whatever they incur for theoretically encroaching on your property. But why so speculative? Why is the narrator using the words theoretically twice in one sentence? I can tell you that something about this irked me, because however humorous a story like this might be, the narrator did some consulting and checking around and would suspect that it's 100% made up. Concrete is apparently normally able to be walked on within a few hours of pouring, and it's highly unlikely that Mr. Bear Driver was able to pull this stunt in the middle of the night unless the workers were using special mixers in the concrete to slow the drying process. And apparently that's only normal with special projects, because for regular projects like this, you want your concrete to dry as quickly as possible. Equally unlikely would be demolishing the old parking lot and then pouring the concrete in the space of a single day. So the author is probably the jerk here, not for the actions his workplace took against the supermarket, but for making me have to go and confirm all that and conclude that it's a complete fairy tale. How many in your party? I recently went to a theme park that allows guests to buy access to shorter lines. So many people do this that the regular lines move incredibly slowly because they keep letting people in from the paid line. After an hour in a line that moved only a few steps every 5 minutes or so, it was hard to be patient watching the employees let literally 10 times as many people go from the short line. When asked, the employee said they don't count people, only parties, and that they've trained to let in one party from the regular line for every 4 parties from the fast line. This is what we were told, but it was obvious from an hour of watching that this was not what was taking place. Counting 60 people being let in from the paid line at once, it was easy to see they were letting in more than 4 parties at a time. Well, why can't I just say my party is 100 people then? So we start making friends with people in the line behind us and grew our party to about 20 people. I wanted to say 100, but I didn't think they'd actually go for it. When the guy asked how many in our party, he was a little confused and I'm not sure he believed us, but he did let us all in together. It was only a minor victory, but we saved a few people an extra 15 minutes in line and it felt good sticking it to the mouse. Well, that last statement might have revealed which theme park you were in, but I doubt they're going to come after you for your story, nor hopefully after the channel. We'll see. I don't think you're a jerk in the situation. Even if the paid experience should maybe be a bit faster, having paid for entry to Blisney World in the first place should have probably meant that you don't have to watch the premium economy people's line moving at a race while you stay standing still. I'd say your solution was fair, and who knows, maybe you inspired others in the people's queue to also unite, unionize, and join together in their vision for slightly shorter queue times. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories. Or if you want to check out some great music, check out easymode.com. If you like Am I the Jerk, give Am I the Genius a shot. Everything linked in the description.